Hello, good evening. It's good weekend, should I say? It's Adil Fazal here, market analyst for CFDs.com, bringing you a review of European markets, given the aftermath of the French. Obviously, fortunately, it's really sad with regards to the Paris tax. It can't be justified in any way at all. It's absolutely brutal, atrocious. I mean, it's insane, really. I mean, nobody can justify such brutal attacks. It's killing of innocent civilians, whether it be, I mean, all lives are equal. I mean, whether it be a French life, whether it be a Moroccan or an Iraqi or a Syrian life, every life is equal. And given the fact that, I mean, over 100,000 Muslims have been killed by ISIS, it really does bring into, especially with regards to it have happening home. I mean, in Europe, it certainly does bring to light the atrocities of this fanatical group, and really needs to be eradicated. It needs to be quashed. It really is a doctrine of Wahhabism. I mean, those of you that may well understand that the Islamic religion, there is an offshoot or a crazy offshoot that started in the 18th century, and they certainly started it all off. It all emanated from there via the Saudi regime, and the Wahhabis were born. And the Wahhabis stroke Salafis were the radicals that were basically put into power when the Afghan war happened with Russia. And obviously the Americans and the CIA were supporting the Afghans, and they created this so-called fanatical group known as the Wahhabis. Even prior to that, they'd created that because obviously the Saudis were bankrolling the Afghans, and obviously the CIA were obviously providing all the artillery and the actual education in terms of fighting, etc. And they were all their agents really, and obviously you had Pakistan involved as well, and it all started off from there with regards to the Cold War, etc. So basically the Russians were neutralized by these individuals. Once Russia had been taken out, there was no more war. So once you have no war and you have this war machine, what happens to this war machine? It goes AWOL, and it goes basically out of control, and that's exactly what's occurred. So it really emanates from there, really, the Cold War, and obviously the Russians were negated to a large extent, and then it's sort of mutated and gone on to other areas. And unfortunately, we've had 9/11, and obviously here in the UK, we've suffered as well by these fanatical groups or fanatical group. It keeps mutating, really. So it's a shame, and it's sickening, and there's no other way to justify the actions of this individual group. And it's a shame that they hijack Islam, because Islam does not justify actions like that, and nor does it say that in the Quran. 99.9% of Muslims around the world are peace, law-abiding individuals, and it's a shame, just like any society, any religion, just like the Crusaders in the Christian religion, just like the fanatical Zionists in Israel, just like the fanatical Islamists, as you can see in the Muslim world, you have a few bad apples, okay? And a few bad apples. I mean, look at the Buddhists in Burma. I mean, what the atrocities that they've done in the name of religion. So it's a shame, and unfortunately, it happens in every religion. And it's just a shame at present that these individuals are using Islam, because they've got this distorted, perverted version of it that they've concocted in their own twisted, sick mindsets, and they want to project that onto the world. Now you'll see if you go on, if you go onto news, if you go onto Twitter, or go onto any social media, you'll see that 99.9% of Muslims reject it. They don't want anything to do with such violent acts, because there's nowhere that's justified. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that anybody who were to kill a non-Muslim, okay, is not amongst us, okay. So he will not enter paradise, and anybody who harms a non-Muslim, it's totally unacceptable. So we are law-abiding citizens, and we have to respect. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim or non-Muslim. You must respect the law of the land, and you must respect the people and the different cultures, and so on and so forth, and religions. It's all about being tolerant, okay, and respecting each other's beliefs, each other's skill sets, etc. And I mean, trading teaches that as well to a large extent, because what's the difference between you and the other trader other than click of a mouse? Okay, so that's all you're doing. You're buying or you're selling, and really it doesn't care about your race, religion, etc. It's just, we're in the market. It doesn't matter if you're black or white. It's totally irrelevant. It's all about the knowledge and the information, the experience that you have, and the guts and your instincts and your mental mindset, etc., etc. We're all on an equal playing field, okay, and we have to respect each other's trading strategies and so on and so forth. one may work for you, well, that same strategy does not work for me. Okay, I might disagree with your strategy being right and correct and based on fundamentals or technicals, or whether you follow technical analysis, whether you follow fundamentals, whether you're a scalper, etc., etc. I mean, I trade based on intermarket analysis, so I have to project the markets based on my theory and the prism in which I perceive the market to trade through. Now, everybody else has their own prism, so I have to respect their prism and the way in which they obviously perceive or understand or read between the lines. So it's all about tolerance. That's basically it. The Prophet, peace be upon him, did say that my way is a middle way. So, i.e., be tolerant, okay? And also he said that make 70 excuses for your brother and sister. So even if your brother and sister has done something wrong, then make 70 excuses for them, i.e., forgive them, okay, and overlook their faults and continue on with life. And it's a shame that these teachings are not passed on. It's an absolute shame. And I hope it is, okay? And all we can do is pray for the people who have lost their lives in Paris, and also have lost their lives over the weekend in other areas. I mean, I think there was another bombing in Beirut. There were other natural disasters as well that lost the lives of many. So every life is equal, okay? And we pray for every loss of life in the world, okay? So let's continue. Now, how do we understand and how do we interpret the Paris attacks? Now, first of all, from a fundamental perspective, as we always know, terrorism comes under geopolitics or socioeconomics. So geopolitics really, and it's a risk-off scenario. So therefore, you will see money going into gold and dollar, and obviously CHF and the yen. Okay, and you are going to see money rotating into bonds as well as a safe haven. So, and also watch out for gold. Gold will certainly catch a bid. Okay, so the Aussie and Kiwi will certainly be under pressure earlier on. Okay, and there'll be risk-off trades. That's basically the first outcome, and you are going to see a general risk-off tone in the markets. Now, IG index are already calling the markets down 100 to 200 points in almost every indices at present. So you are seeing a massive risk-off tone across the markets, especially in Europe and especially the French indices. Okay. Now let's try and decipher this. So be sure to visit cfds.com, your trading specialist. And alternatively, for the educational side, we've got cfds.education. Now there is a new app as well that's been launched, so be sure to visit that and download that as well, called Trade Signal. Okay, now let's try and decipher these markets. So it's all about risk off, given the fact that we had a risk off tone in the US markets, given the weaker retail sales numbers. Okay, that certainly caused the US markets to flush. Now you can see the S&P 500. Bring up a daily chart of the S&P 500. We are coming into potential support. Previous resistance equals support. The 1990 certainly is on the equation, given the risk-off tone. Obviously, that will be set from the European markets. Whether or not the US markets have already factored that in, given the late sell-off on Friday, that's a different question. And that certainly will be an answer that I'll be looking for, given the fact that we have slammed into gap fill at 2018. If we do continue to sell off, then you do have a gap at 1995 on the S&P 500. Okay, you have left an unfilled gap above, but that's impossible to hit at this current juncture. You also have 2050 or 2048 gap, and that's going to be very hard to fill as well. So these two areas are going to be absolutely tough and very hard to navigate between. Okay. Okie dokie. Right. The Nasdaq as well. I can bring up the Nasdaq just to give you an insight. The Nasdaq, as you can see here, flushed late. We did try to bounce, but we totally failed, and the market sold off quite substantially. The daily chart has closed the gap on the Nasdaq at 45.10 or 45.06. So therefore, exercise some extreme caution with regards to being on the short side in terms of US indices from my perspective. But if we do flush, then you are looking at the 200 MA on the downside, and that certainly will be the key bellwether or benchmark, which is around the 4430 level in terms of the market itself. Now that is classed as a gap fill level as well, so bear that in mind. So if we do flush quite substantially, given the risk off tone, then you are looking at 4410, 4420 as gap fill on the actual Nasdaq on the downside. So bear that in mind. You do have previous resistance equals support here as well at 4450. So again, that's something else that we're going to take into consideration too. Okay, take your pivot low from here, take it to the pivot high here, and you are looking at a 38 to 50% fib. And again, that's going to bring up the support zone in that area. Okay, so let's look at this from here to here, and again, that does coincide with this gap level or this diagonal trend line, which is 4400. So don't be surprised if you see a 100-point sell-off on the Nasdaq, given the risk of concerns. Okay, again, special prayers go out to all the people that have lost their lives. Again, it's really, really upsetting. I mean, over the weekend now, I mean, on Friday I was with my daughter, and we were in town, and Basically, it was shocking. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. I got back and I realised I've been stopped out on the Nasdaq, and unbelievable. I mean, I just couldn't believe the events that were unfolding. I mean, it's just truly crazy. I mean, you've accepted it to a large extent. It's become normal in terms of the Arab world, but in Europe, I mean, it's even today. I think I went to the Trafford Centre, and then there was some terror warning alert that there was going to be an attack in Manchester as well, the Trafford Centre and the city centre. So there was certainly a high risk of alert. So it's so crazy. It's just crazy to see that actually occurring here. It's surreal. Okay, and let's just pray that that tolerance and love for one another is on the increase, and obviously intolerance and hatred and animosity is certainly on the decrease. It's just crazy times that we live in. In terms of the actual Nasdaq, as you can see, gap fill, so therefore you are looking at a potential bounce. But again, terrorism phase will certainly dominate. Okay, now first of all, let's look at the French CAC, because that's going to be the hardest hit, given the fact that obviously you have this risk on tone. The actual volatility index, you have a resistance up here and up here, so anything is possible now from my perspective in terms of the risk of the markets, or in terms of risk on and risk off. So that certainly needs to be taken into the equation as well in terms of intercepting. So don't be surprised if you see a spike up to 34. Very, very high possibility of that happening. Okay, so in terms of risk and etc., it's going to be, especially for the French CAC, it's going to be very, very powerful in terms of the sell-off. Now, given the fact that the borders are closed, and obviously it's going to hurt GDP going forward, etc., etc. Okay, and that's more or less basically guarantees QE now in December. Mr. Draghi will have no other choice but to actually increase that QE program. So that's certainly a done deal, and the Euro USD will certainly come under immense pressure. Okay, there's no point looking at a 10-minute or 60-minute chart now. The inverted head and shoulders will be negated. So this neckline here, which is at 4730, forget about that. That's going to be taken out, and the inverted head and shoulders formation will certainly fail. We had this gap fill. That's going to be out of the equation now too. Now, in terms of where the markets are going to find support, now let's try and work this out. In terms of the French CAC, now you do have gap fill support at 4610, then obviously you've got to close this gap up here as well. So don't be surprised if you see that gap close in terms of the market itself. That's basically a two zone. So 4610, and you have 4460, and then also you have a gap down here as well. So certainly an opportunity now for all these gaps to close in the French CAC. So certainly a very, very solid risk off tone from my perspective on the French CAC. Okay. Now, if we cross-reference that with the CAC mid and small, okay, so let's just cross-reference that with the CAC mid and small, and you are going to see a flush down 10700. You do have a gap fill level down here, so again, that's something I'm going to observe. And then obviously you've got a gap fill down here, again, something I'm going to observe. So, and also you have a gap fill down here. Again, something that we're going to observe. So these are all the zones that we're looking for. Okay, all the zones that we're looking for on the downside. Okay, so certainly very bearish from my perspective, and certainly a flush on the downside. The CAC mid 60, again, this is going to be looking to flush quite substantially. Okay, you are looking at these zones here, here, and here. Okay, so here, here, and here. So these are the zones that you're looking for in terms of flushing on the downside. If you come into these areas, then you need to exercise certain caution in your short positions and be very be ready for a potential short squeeze. But until then, it's not looking good at all. Okay, certainly looking very, very bearish from my perspective. Now, the German DAX, that's a different story altogether in terms of understanding the indices itself. The German DAX, if you look at the daily chart, if I show you this first of all, the German DAX has gap fill support at the 10,500 level. Now we are gapping low below that around the 10,460 level. There is an unfilled gap below at 9,900, but given the fact that the German economy really isn't as affected, the main effect will be on the French CAC. That's going to be the index worst hit from my perspective. Okay, in terms of the MDAX, you can see that we are coming into a potential gap fill over here that will more than likely get flushed, and you are looking at potentially either closing this gap below or looking at potential support down here. So again, keep an eye on that and see exactly how that plays out. That's going to be quite interesting. You can see here we have a break, and it's all about that gap as well. Okay, right. The Euro stocks now. Let's have a look at the Euro stocks. Okay, Euro stocks itself, daily chart. Right, so you have the inverted head and shoulders formation. We are looking at 3200 potential flush on the downside. So the inverted head and shoulders certainly is potentially open, provided we stay above the 3200. If you break the 3200, then it's certainly looking very, very bearish. Now, you do have previous resistance equal support here at 3270. Very unlikely that's going to hold, and you are looking at a potential flush lower back to this retesting of this inverted head and shoulders. So the only index really from my perspective overtly bearish is the French CAC, okay, and that's going to be under pressure. Now the FTSE 100 also is bearish to a large extent, given the fact that it's had a commodity rout. The commodities have been absolutely butchered. We hit a pivot low below 6,000 on a Friday, and that's certainly going to continue. The next level of support on the FTSE is now seen at 5,900, and that's going to be the key level of support. And you are going to see a lot of selling pressure on the FTSE itself, given the fact that it's going to suffer from this risk-off tone. The only thing that will help the FTSE really is going to be gold and oil. Now, this terrorism phase may well put a potential bottom on the FTSE, so bear that in mind, given the fact that commodities will certainly start to catch a bid. So that certainly is something to consider as a trader. Okay, so given the fact that we've taken out fib 75% from the market open, which is going to be at 6030, I think the market's currently trading at the 6,000 level. Okay, so certainly something to consider. Again, support seen at 5,900 on the FTSE, and it certainly isn't looking good at all. Okay, I think that's a market wrap. Again, remember, terrorism phase dominate, and it's a risk-off tone in general. Goodbye now.